So we already spoke about motion, and we said that in order to describe motion we have to use different types of physical quantities such as acceleration and velocity and displacement. Now, we never really specified what actually creates our motion, what allows our objects to move from some initial position to a final position. Well, it turns out that force is that something. Force allows our objects to move. It creates motion. And it's usually defined as the push or pull on or of an object. Now, force, just like velocity, displacement, and acceleration, is a vector. It has both magnitude as well as direction. So, for example, if I have a box resting on a horizontal frictionless surface, if I pull on that object, on that box, I will allow it to move. I will create motion. So, I pull and I create motion. Now, force is represented by a capital letter F with a vector symbol on top. So, I have to specify not only the value of the force, the magnitude, but also my direction. Now, force can be broken down to two types. We have contact forces and non-contact forces. So, some examples of contact forces are push-pull of an object. We have friction, we have normal force, we have tension, and things of that nature. What about non-contact forces? Well, before we talk about non-contact forces, let's go back to contact. Contact forces are created or exist when objects are physically touching. For example, if I have this marker and it's stationary on my hand and I physically touch my marker will move because I'm creating a force. I'm exerting a force, and so I'm creating motion. My object begins to accelerate. Now, non-contact forces are forces where there is no physical contact. For example, if I take my marker and I let go, my marker will fall from my initial position to a final position on my hand. And even though there's no force physically touching this marker, it's still traveling, it's still accelerating because of gravity. Gravity is simply a non-contact force that is created because of mass. Now, likewise, electrostatic force is also a non-contact force that exists between objects that have charge. And strong nuclear force is a force that exists in the nucleus of an atom. It holds the nucleons together. Now, we already said that force creates motion. But how exactly does force create motion? Well, force is required to accelerate an object. So it creates motion by accelerating an object, either by changing the magnitude or direction of my moving object. Now, how exactly do we measure force? Well, one example of measuring a force is shown here. Let's suppose that we have a spring scale. So the spring scale actually reads, it tells us how much force this box creates. So gravity acts on this box, pulling it downward, creating a force, and the reading is read on this spring scale, and it tells us how much of a force we have. So force can be calculated in different ways. For example, we can use a spring scale to calculate the force of gravity, the force that gravity exerts on our mass, this box. Now, the formula for force is shown here. So force is equal to the mass of the object multiplied by our acceleration, and the units are kilograms per meter, kilogram times meter per second squared. And this is known as a Newton, given by a capital letter N.